I wanted to bring you Megyn Kelly and Jake Tapper and also Alex Thompson of Axios, who won an award for his fearless reporting about Joe Biden and his dementia. Megyn Kelly grills Jake Tapper about his coverage. And I'm going to insert something in here, and I promise you that I will tell you when I do, that she missed. But she does a phenomenal job of grilling him. So,
and here we go.
As you know, this book, it's right in the subtitle, it involves coverage of the so-called cover-up. But Jake, the criticism has been that you're complaining about a cover-up about Joe Biden's mental acuity that failed, that right-wing pundits saw, the right wing in general saw, that independent media saw and reported on, and that was no mystery.
That anybody with eyes and a fair comprehension of the world and what they're seeing saw as far back as 2017. For me, in 2019, when I really started to follow politics more closely, it was immediately obvious. But let's continue. Even
to left-wing and so-called mainstream reporters who were not fooled, but chose willful blindness instead of honest reporting, and that you were part of it. How do you respond?
And guys, as we set out on this journey, please, it costs you nothing. Just thumb up this video right now. And if you're new and you like the content, subscribe and hit the all notification bell.
It's a tough and fair question. I would say that Alex and I, after Election Day, interviewed more than 200 people, 200 mostly Democratic insiders, and almost all of these interviews were after the election. And they justified to themselves what they had done in terms of misrepresenting how the president was, not just
lying
to me and Alex and other reporters, but also just to each other and to the world and to Democrats and to the cabinet, et cetera, by saying that there was this existential threat of Donald Trump and only Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump, and that justified everything in their minds. After that existential threat was over, because the election was over and Donald Trump won, we found, Alex and myself, remarkably willing to talk to us.
Ooh, remarkably willing. Oh, let's give them big applause. They lied and lied and lied and then said maybe something's not right. Maybe we can admit something and get it off of our conscience in a selfish act.
Either off the record or on background, or in some cases on the record, about what they saw. One of the things that emerged was that there were two Bidens. One was the fine Biden, serviceable.
Sorry, when did that Biden ever show his face publicly? I don't believe that for a second, that you really believe that.
Adequate. And the other one was a non-functioning Biden, and that's the one we saw the night of the debate. And that's the one we saw some clips of here and there that you just showed. And that non-functioning Biden, the one that lost his train of thought in a significant way, not in the way just that every human loses their train of thought, but in a way that shows that he's having trouble articulating his very views. And the one who forgot the name of close aides, who was not able to come up with George Clooney's name, didn't seem to recognize him, all that sort of thing. That non-functioning Biden was, according to our reporting, showed up as far back as 2015, after the death of Beau, where one top aide said that tragedy, the loss of Beau, was like watching somebody pour water on sand. That was the effect on his psyche. And there were other moments, 2017, 2018, you hear her report, one of the reasons he came to that conclusion was because of the recordings they heard of Joe Biden in 2017 talking to his ghostwriter, in which he was similarly inclined. Obviously in 2019, 2020, there were other moments like that. Most of his campaign staff and others would say, like, he's 78, he's 79, he has senior moments, but he's fine.
So what the hell is he doing running for president? You just were trying to usurp power for yourself, knowing that you were going to get in a puppet. And I'm talking about the Democrats in general and those running his campaign that you could wield and manipulate. So you were really running him for power for yourself, whether that was Obama or the group at the top all together ruling as a cabal, which is what appears to have happened.
He's fine, he's fine. Well, he wasn't fine. And throughout his presidency, that non-functioning Biden would show up more and more and more, and he was worse and worse and worse. really deteriorating tremendously the next time there was a really horrible family incident, which was when Hunter Biden's plea deal fell apart in the summer of 2023. And then obviously in June, he was convicted.
You mean his bagman that he sent over to Ukraine to secure funds for himself? You mean that guy, the druggie, the one that was filming himself with prostitutes and doing cocaine? Oh, you've obviously done a tremendous job as a father, Joe.
And the fear of losing his son, not to jail, but maybe to a relapse, to an overdose, to a suicide, who knows, was a very real fear. And the threat of losing a third child really just diminished him tremendously, according to top aides. So all of which is to say that this was a deterioration, this was a progression. And look, knowing what I know now, obviously, I feel tremendous humility about my coverage, that Laura Trump interview.
Is that really falling on your sword and admitting that you were wrong? I feel humility.
For example, et cetera.
We'll
She saw something that I did not see.
No. That many people saw. Not just her, to give her credit. She saw it. Everybody who wasn't willfully obtuse was witness to Biden's dementia. You chose not to cover it because you are a paid shill, along with the rest of the media, for the DNC and saw Trump as the existential threat that you described earlier. There are reasons, and that is why nobody trusts you, and you're here doing damage control with the book, with appearing on Megyn Kelly's show to try to get some semblance of trust from the public back when we owe you absolutely none. People demonstrate who they are in tough situations when they are willing to be forthright, honest, and to the point. Megyn Kelly is. That's why much of the public has trust in her. She goes both ways and she asks hard-hitting questions. You, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, none of you did in this case. You have lost trust. Nobody should be giving you any of their trust back.
At the time, 100%. And I own that. I did ask Joe Biden to be transparent about his health records in an interview in 2020. I did ask him about the fact that voters
but then he wasn't.
Thought that he was not transparent at all. No.
He promised you that he would be transparent about his health records, and then he wasn't. And when you sat with him again,
at all.
including 1 month after the Jackie Walorski thing, you didn't ask him about it. You didn't follow up on the fact that he was falling up the stairs, that he was losing his train of thought regularly, that he was slurring, that he was incomprehensible, that he was getting lost on the White House lawn. You sat right across from him and you asked none of that, notwithstanding the fact that he had promised you he would be fully transparent about his health issues.
That's true, but I did ask him about his age and the fact that the American people had concluded that even though he said whenever anybody brought up the subject of his age, watch me. And I said,
yes,
they're watching you and they are concerned that you were too old for this job.
But you know as well as I do that there's a way of, you can say, hey, there's this poll on your age, or you could say, you just forgot that Jackie Walorski was dead. You asked where she was moments after watching a videotape tribute to her. You lowered the flags at the White House after she died. This happened 13 days before you sat with him. There is a way of pressing a man like that on the actual infirmities to bring it home to him and to the audience, and you didn't do it.
Really excellent questioning by Megyn Kelly, holding him to task, not being overly aggressive so that he has the right to be defensive in the minds of the viewers. This is just first-rate stuff from her.
That's correct. I didn't. And like I said, I feel humility about my coverage. I mean, it's not like I was asking him his favorite movie or his favorite.
Just cash your fucking check, Jake Tapper. Cash that big-ass check that CNN and the DNC give you every year and be happy that you have money to spend.
Color, we were talking about Putin. We were talking about other issues of national importance. But yeah, I mean, of course, I've said I look back at my coverage with humility, and I wish I did cover the issues of age and acuity, but I wish I had covered them much more. And I wish, I mean, of course, it's May 2025. Do I wish that in that 10, 15-minute interview I had with Biden in October 2022, that this had been the only subject because I had then
Well, it
what I
wasn't
know
just that,
now.
though, Jake. It wasn't just that. I mean, you sat with him a couple of times in the course of his presidency, and these issues
No, I
were not
didn't.
pressed. Well, there was
No,
at least that time,
I-
and then there was the time at the beginning. And but separate and apart from that,
but Megyn,
you
Megyn, hold on,
covered the
hold on.
Biden's
I sat
presidency.
with-
No. Let me just finish my point.
I'm
You
just saying
covered the
I had
Biden
one interview with
presidency.
him during his. I had one
Okay,
interview
right.
with
And
him
it was
during the
13 days
presidency.
after the Jackie Walorski thing. But you covered the Biden presidency aggressively throughout the 4 years, and you didn't cover mental acuity hardly at all. I mean, time and time again, when issues came up, you seemed to be running cover for the president.
I don't
You didn't
think
seem
that's
interested.
true.
Well,
Yep. And I'm going to bring you that evidence in a moment. Even in 2024, the stutter, I'll bring you that.
I mean, we'll start with the Laura Trump issue that you referred. Here it is.
Here's from
This happened in
2020.
2020.
As she just said.
Joe Biden, as we all know, has worked to overcome a stutter. How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You are
to
no
watch somebody on stage
I can't,
search for
this is so
questions.
amazing.
You're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I
a
think that you
stuttering.
were mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
And it's very concerning to a lot of people that this could be the leader of the free world.
Okay.
That is all I'm saying. I genuinely feel
Laura
sorry
Trump.
for Joe Biden.
I appreciate it. I'm sure it was from a place of concern. We all believe that. Laura
you
Trump, thank you so much.
Fucker.
Do you want to apologize to Laura Trump now?
I've already apologized to her. I called her months ago.
And what did she say?
I mean, I don't want to disclose the contents of a private conversation, but I thought the conversation went well. And
How about a big FU that you were running cover that during you, Jake Tapper was one of the purveyors of the Find People on Both Sides hoax, taking one snippet of what Trump said when he said that there, you know, and I know it, that there were fine people on both sides, and then completely ignoring that he said, and I don't mean the neo-Nazis or the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. Jake Tapper was a big purveyor of that. So please don't tell me that that TDS did not infiltrate, did not color your coverage and your discussion with Laura Trump. This is what makes you dishonest. This is what makes you a bad reporter, Jake.
she said, she has said this publicly, so I feel fine sharing it. She said that she would never mock anybody's stutter. But I mean, after we did the research for this book, and I realized how bad his acuity issues were.
That many of you out there saw years ago, and you were mocked for having stated it by people like Jake Tapper.
I called Laura Trump and I said, you were right.
She was totally right. That's the thing, because when I watched that clip, and I'm giving voice to what a lot of people watching the show are feeling, Jake, I feel angry because she was right. And not only did you not allow her to make her comments, but you seemed to try to humiliate her. You had a hostility toward the position, but she was totally right. And then you lectured her on how she was in no position to diagnose cognitive decline, which you guys do at length, including on page 4 of your book.
The media went after Donald Trump because somebody helped him, a Marine helped him up the stairs and helped guide him or something. And they were saying that this is evidence, or the way that he held a glass of water, that this is evidence that Donald Trump is not healthy enough to be president. But of course they didn't do it. This is what during Trump's first presidency, but they didn't do that for Jake at all.
Describe at length his cognitive decline, which is all she tried to do with you. But you had such a visceral reaction to her. And my feeling is that's because you didn't want to hear it.
No, I'm happy to talk about this. I didn't come here thinking that you weren't going to ask me about this. So I'm happy to talk to you about it.
No, I know.
The first time I saw the coverage of Laura Trump's comments, which were interpreted as her mocking Joe Biden's stutter, was in January 2020. I read it in conservative media. I read it in the Daily Mail.
So let me get this straight. You didn't go to the source and watch Laura Trump's coverage or what she said. You took your cues from other media sources rather than what was on film. And therefore, you're blaming other sources for the way you interacted with Laura Trump. That's not good reporting, Jake. That makes you a shill. That makes you a stupid person, frankly.
And that's where I saw that her comments were being interpreted that way. After those comments were publicized, it got a lot of coverage. And Sully Sullenberger wrote an op-ed in the New York Times criticizing her about this.
You took your
So
cue from
that's the context for that.
Oh, congratulations
that
on
I
excusing your
was
behavior.
following up on a story that had been out there months before. This is also in the context of October 2020, a very intense time. People on the Biden side are saying crazy things about Trump. People on the Trump side are saying crazy things about Biden.
Really crazy? Really crazy? Like he's not fit to be president? Like he's running a campaign from his basement? Oh yeah, totally crazy things. Whereas you're calling Trump a Russian agent.
Including Don Jr. suggesting that Joe Biden is a pedophile. So that is
Which
the
may
larger
be
context. But as I said,
with his daughter,
her comments have aged well. My comments have aged poorly. I own that. But I think what is significant is, in addition to me owning that, the reporting that Alex and I have done, which is
okay, Jake, this is the part where I'm bringing it to you guys. How about in 2024, when you still went along the stutter narrative? And I'm going to play you this clip.
Biden embraces his stutter, talking about it, while Trump mocks it, exaggerates it, belittles it.
And by the way, I have never previously known Joe Biden to be a stutterer. This is the frame that the media falsely created, that he was a lifelong stutterer, because most people can't go back in order to defend. It was a completely false frame that they issued and put Joe Biden and used as a shield so that they could mock those who were criticizing his ability to communicate. He never had a stutter before because he likely wouldn't have been elected senator back in the 1970s had he had one that was very noticeable. Jake, would you like to apologize for saying that he had a stutter as far back as 2024 before the debate? This is what makes you a dishonest shill. And that is what Megyn Kelly did not bring into this interview, unfortunately, because Jake Tapper is dead to rights. Game, set, match.
beyond just, and when I say just, I don't mean to diminish it, but the comments of Joe Biden making gaffes, saying things stupid, tripping, are all important and all deserved to be aired and all deserve scrutiny. But as you know, Megyn, because even though you look 30 years younger than me, we're roughly the same age, Joe Biden has been saying stupid things for decades. Okay,
I get what you're saying, but this minimizes it too, because it was more than saying stupid things. But I'm telling you, like over here in my ecosphere, we were covering all of these. It wasn't just falling down; it was getting lost. It was some of the stuff you report in your book. We knew, and we were reporting on, like the multi-jump cuts in the videos of him, where it was obvious he couldn't get through a 1-minute take. So they had to use those. It was clear to us that he was using teleprompter and there was some reporting on that at the time, all of which the White House was denying. Now, with the current White House, I have some connections. With the Joe Biden White House, I had none, but you did. You did. And so while you've been in Washington 30 years, Jake, you guys, you and CNN have White House connections, but there was no effort. None to get to the bottom of this. And now for you guys to write this book like there was a cover up, it's like there was a cover up and there was an attempted cover up. It could only ever work if you allowed it, if the press allowed it. Some of us tried not to, and some of us were complicit.
First of all, the Biden White House did not like me. Okay, I do not have great connections with the Biden White House.
Well, clearly you have a lot of sources. You say you talked to over 200 sources for this book.
So you have some election,
you could have called and worked.
No, that's the point, is that they were not being honest.
They didn't like me. I'm the victim.
Well, how did the Wall Street Journal get it in June?
I'm the victim. They didn't like me. Oh, no. My heart goes out to you, Jake, despite the fact that you used stuttering as an excuse as recently as 2024. I feel terrible for you, Jake.
Of 2024. Liar. And Jake Tapper and CNN couldn't find sources for this story then before he dropped out?
Annie Linsky and Siobhan Hughes did an amazing job in their reporting, and they should be heralded. And I heralded them. I had them on my show right after the debate to talk about their great reporting. But Annie
after
Linsky,
the debate, but you did not put them on when they published that story, which was before the debate.
Correct. I don't know what the booking situation was, but it wasn't because I didn't want them. I'm sure I said that day, let's book. I'm sure I said that day, let's book that. Did they?
Yeah, you put on a Democrat, and you allowed the Democrat to rip on the report as a Rupert Murdoch sponsored hit piece.
No.
It's just
Megyn.
That's
Megyn,
what happened.
if we're going to do this, let's just stick to the facts here, okay?
I really respect Megyn Kelly. She is fair. She is asking pinpointed questions. This is A+ work by her. Once again, this is really great.
When there is a damaging report.
That's what I've been doing all along.
I'm talking about what you just said.
Didn't miss the biggest story of the century when it comes to presidential politics. And one of us did.
Yep.
Okay. So there is a difference, okay, between the clips of Joe Biden falling on a stage at the Air Force Academy graduation. There is a difference between the clip of Joe Biden embarrassingly forgetting that a Republican member of Congress who he's talking about has died. Those are embarrassing. Those are important. But there is a difference between that and the investigative journalism that Alex and I were able to do and only able to do.
No, because there's a whole series of clips of Joe Biden behaving in such an egregious manner that the layperson, the truck driver out there knew, as I said yesterday, something ain't right with Joe. We all knew it, yet you willfully ignored the reality. And you're just saying that at certain embarrassing moments, how come everybody else can piece the pieces of the puzzle together and you were unable to? Because you're a Democrat shill, MFer.
After the election. And I know you know this because you've been talking about the scoops in the book and you've been talking about.
I don't diminish the importance of the book. I don't. I have supported the importance of the book and we'll talk about the contents of the book at length. But there is no way we can have that conversation with an audience that is as skeptical of your ability to tell the story as mine is without addressing your role in this, right? Like Alex is a different story, but you've watched the coverage since it came out that you wrote this book. There's a legion of articles about how comparing you in some instances to like OJ, instead of if I did it, this is if I hid it. That like you are not the right messenger to bring the story about the cover up because you helped, you allowed it, and you likely did that out of a desire.
Leave it in the comment section. Do you guys believe Jake Tapper, or with the story that Megyn is pinpointedly describing and asking him about and what I've filled in with my commentary? Do you believe Jake Tapper, and what credibility score do you give him on a 1 to 10? Please leave it in the comment section. I really want to know what you guys think.
To help Joe Biden and hurt Donald Trump. You didn't want to do anything that might improve Trump's chances.
Yep. You see how uncomfortable he was?
I do not think that is accurate. I do not think that is true at all. The idea that Siobhan and Annie do their piece and we have on the co-chair of the Biden campaign is not me trying to cover for the Biden campaign. That is me,
of course it is,
putting the questions of the reporting that were made to him and saying things like, so you really haven't seen any moment, or you would acknowledge that, wouldn't you acknowledge that he's lost a step, he's 81, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said before, if I had known then what I know now, would I have been more aggressive? Yes, of course.
How come everybody else knew it? That's the point, that you were either willfully being obtuse or just flat out lying. And now you're doing damage control. That's my take.
Of course.
How did I know and you didn't know? I'm just curious. Because when I saw that Wall Street Journal report in June of 24, I scoffed at it. Like, okay, it's an attempt. But it's lame. Everybody on the right-wing ecosystem and the independent media ecosystem knew it was a lame attempt that only scratched the surface. We had all been discussing his serious cognitive problems for years by that point. Jake.
Quote, behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping, unquote. The Wall Street Journal is owned by News Corp, which is run by the Murdochs. Beyond the headline, there is some critical nuance here. The article is mostly based on observations of Republicans, with former Speaker Kevin McCarthy the only one going on the record. They do note in the article that most of the criticism comes from Republicans. Have you heard any concerns from anyone who has met with President Biden about him seeming a little slower?
No.
In June of 2022, this show did a full 2-hour program on his cognitive decline.
I heard it. That's right.
It was. I know we want to pretend. I'm mentioning the Wall Street Journal as a courtesy, but those of us on this side of the aisle had been reporting in depth on his multiple problems and the obvious lies we were being told for years. For years. You really want the audience to believe you were fooled?
What do you mean I was fooled? I'm not saying I was fooled.
No, there are two options: stupid or liar. Stupid or liar. When everybody else sees a pattern and you're unable to, that either means that you're intentionally obfuscating it, which means that you're lying, or you're stupid. So take your pick. There is no other option, Jake. Or cowardly, maybe, or that combines with liar.
I'm saying we all saw these moments before the camera, and they were obviously concerning, and he was obviously aging, and that was significant. But
so
the
what
people
did you
at
do
the
to
White
get to
House,
the bottom of it?
I'm trying to answer the question. But so the people at the White House, when I would call, when others would call, when Alex would call, would lie. He's fine. He's fine. You'd call Democrats and say, what are you seeing behind the scenes here? Because this is concerning. He's fine.
So you're putting the blame on the Democrats rather than your own ability to investigate and see the tea leaves as they line up.
He's fine. This is just a moment. He's 79. He's 80.
So
he has
stupid.
moments like that, but he's
You're
fine. His
funding.
decision-making's fine. They're still saying that. They're still saying that. And let me defend Annie and Siobhan there for a second, because you just said that their Wall Street Journal story just scratched the surface. They got what they could get in June 2024. And I went back, and Alex and I went back to report some of the same things that they reported on. For example, there was a meeting in the White House about Ukraine funding in January 2024. And we were able to get people to say things as a Democratic member of Congress that I don't know who Annie and Siobhan's sources are, but they were not able to get them to do that. I assume that, they had dozens of sources for that article, but not one of the Democrats that they talked to would even talk on background. It is a complicated thing to try to get to.
But your commentary on your show, yes, I'm going to bring you in. But your commentary on your show, Jake, consistently ran in one direction.
Yep.
Occasionally, you would ask some tough questions.
That's true.
I mean,
Along with MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, they were running cover for Biden because they had Trump derangement syndrome. So they allowed the country to suffer with somebody at the helm, and I put that in air quotes, who was captaining the ship while the rest of the cabal that was actually running things ran the United States Titanic into the iceberg, the blue Titanic, and we all suffered along with them as they allowed illegals to stream over the border on a continued rate, allowed Russia to invade Ukraine, and the refunding Iran. I'm not going to get into it all, but I'm very upset with the media because they didn't even cover that. Who was running the show? That's the question.
here you are in September 2023 saying that Biden was sharp mentally. September of 2023. You said he's sharp mentally. I think the question is physically, right? He's sharp mentally. And then you pointed out that his opponent, Donald Trump, was only a couple of years younger than he was. There are many examples where you're doing that kind of coverage.
Okay, so let's be honest and full about what you're talking about.
You're not.
There's no problem with honesty on this show.
Thank you, Megyn. That is the right response. Exactly what I was just saying. God, I love her.
Okay.
Yeah, let's watch it. Let's watch it. Yeah, Frank Fork came on with a biography about Joe Biden.
Frank Fork came on to talk about his biography with Joe Biden, and I'm trying to summarize what his conclusions were. So he is saying that Biden
and where is the part where you say he's not sharp mentally, Frank? We've seen the following 10 examples in the past year. Never mind 3 years.
Where I wasn't. I've already said, I wish I had covered this more aggressively. Frank Fork had come to the show to talk about his book about President Biden. This was in September 2023. And I interviewed him about his book, and that was the end of that. Now,
And you asked no tough questions or brought up concerns that the regular public those with eyes, ears, and a frickin' pulse had, except for the far lefties and the liberal in air quotes because of really totalitarian Democrats.
In retrospect, I say again, I wish I had been more aggressive. I do.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
our reporting suggests, and like I
You're a
said,
bad
we've talked to
reporter
more
then.
than 200 people, Democratic insiders, that the real deterioration of President Biden, and yes, there was a degression or regression, whatever you want to call it, deterioration since 2015. But it really started to intensify in the summer of 2023 when when Hunter Biden's plea deal fell apart and Joe Biden was terrified about what that effect would have on his son.
I accept that. I accept that it got worse in 23.
And people close to him say that was a real demarcation. And in October 2023,
that might have been a demarcation downwards, but again, we saw it as far back as 2019, 2020, and you were defending Joe Biden as somebody who had questions attacking his stutter. How dare you impugn all the young children out there with a stuttered? Did I stutter, motherfucker?
It's the last cabinet meeting for almost a year, and cabinet secretaries tell us that fall 2023 began what they call a weird period where they were kept at bay, where they were kept away from President Biden.
And now we're getting the substance, which I do want to talk about. I'm about to switch to that. But let me just ask you, because when we got to leading up to the debate, which you anchored, that June 27th debate, 2024, there was a ton of news leading into that debate in that month. And we look back at your coverage and found that you ignored it. Not only did you ignore the Jackie Walorski moment when you had him 13 days later, but you ignored the freeze up that he had at the Juneteenth celebration. You ignored what happened at the G7 when he wandered off and Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy, had to go find him. You ignored the freeze up at the George Clooney LA fundraiser. You didn't cover it. You only covered it after the debate, after George Clooney wrote his op-ed. Jake, nobody made you do that. There was your network at every turn was telling us those were, quote, cheap fakes. And you were not combating that narrative.
The administration strongly criticized the media for clips showing the president appearing to be confused, freezing at times, and you called it cheap fakes, misinformation, disinformation. In one case, even implied that it was the product of artificial intelligence, calling it deep fakes. Do you have any regret over using that language?
Not at all. Not at all. And let me be clear, it was a certain part of the media. And, I mean, you can speak to this better than I can. A certain part of the media which was doing this. And look, independent mainstream fact checkers in the press and misinformation experts have been calling out cheap fakes. And at the end of the day, they're fakes. That's what they were. Targeting the president. They had said, the reporters and these misinformation experts said that this president was being targeted. And what we did was echo them. That's what we did. And look, we'll certainly continue to call that out. And the cheap fakes didn't come from me. I didn't coin that. That didn't come from this White House or this podium. That came from the media. They called it cheap fakes. And they said this president, President Biden, was being targeted.
CNN was actively misleading us on what our very eyes were showing us. That's the truth. That's the record.
I will acknowledge that after I was named co-moderator of the debate, I tried to make sure that my coverage was fairly vanilla, both about Trump and about Biden.
I'm sure.
Because I just wanted to get to the debate. And, the Biden people and the Trump people, I'm kind of frankly surprised that either one of them agreed to have me as a moderator because both sides disliked me so much.
Right.
But yeah, I remember that moment. And I remember that moment, the glitch at the immigration event, and not getting much attention outside of conservative media at all. And Alex and I are here.
Why do you think that is? Because the whole leftist media, the whole corporate media has a vested interest in maintaining the power of the Democrats. Thus, they can continue to get funding and revenue from, for example, pharmaceutical companies that advertise. Why do pharmaceuticals advertise with the media? So that they can keep criticism at bay because the media doesn't want to bite the hand that feeds them.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer.
If you have RFK in, well, all of a sudden that's in jeopardy right now. Thus, their revenues are going to go down. So you follow the money. That is only one part of it. The other part, of course, is TDS. But F you, Jake, because you're once again lying. You just kept things at bay. You were trying to be neutral. Since when were you ever neutral to Trump? I re-informed the viewers out there of the fine people hoax that you were a big purveyor of that I discussed earlier.
To say that conservative media was right and conservative media was correct, and that there should be a lot of soul searching, not just among me, but among the legacy media to begin with, all of us, for how this was covered or not covered sufficiently. 100%. So, I mean, I'm not here to defend coverage that I've already acknowledged I wish I could do differently.
Mm-hmm.
And conservative media absolutely has every right to say, we were hip to this and the legacy media was not. Now, I do not accept that I was part of a cover-up. I do not accept that I was just providing cover for Joe Biden. I think a lot of these clips are not fair.
You were 100% behind the cover-up. You were 100% complicit in it. Everybody else saw it. You didn't. You covered it up.
The one that is fair is the Laura Trump clip, and I own it, and I regret it, and I've told her that privately. And
then why again did you, in 2024, reissue and defend Joe Biden with a stutter?
Biden embraces his stutter, talking about it, while Trump mocks it, exaggerates it, belittles it.
God, I wish Megyn had brought that up.
That's completely fair. But what we uncovered after the election, what people were willing to tell us after the election, was so shocking. And yeah, the Jackie Walorski thing is awful. But I would posit that President Biden not being able to come up with the name of his national security advisor in December 2022 is important information.
So that's the coverage that she did with Jake Tapper. I think that she did a phenomenal job. I think that she asked pointed questions. I think that she was incisive and that she kept him to task. Again, I wish that she had asked how Jake Tapper can possibly defend in the year 2024 after all this happens, bringing up the stutter once again, and how you don't think that he could possibly not be complicit in running cover up for the Democratic Party. That is, you could defend it in 2020 and say that you were wrong and fall on your petard, but not in 2024 after everything that we've seen. I find Jake to be just doing damage control for himself, for his network, that deserve all the ire that Americans rightfully give them. And the Democrat brand should be tarnished permanently. I mean, I'm talking about a stain like OJ had, because they've run a similar cover-up to a crime that endangered the entire United States of America and allowed for Iran to have money sent to them, that allowed for the Hamas attack, the Russian invasion, and our own nation to be invaded by illegal immigrants streaming across the border as they opened it up, threw open the gates for electoral advantage. I don't feel a lot of sympathy for Joe Biden. I feel none for Jake Tapper, who I find to be a liar. But I want to know what you think. Am I being overly harsh with Jake? I want to know your thoughts in the comment section, so please leave them below. God bless. Fantastic job, Megyn Kelly. If you're new, subscribe and give me a thumbs up as well.